All right. Okay. Baseball. All right. Okay. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jaya Koro More Tumavena Kedayana Jagat Samsare Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jaya Koro More Tumavena Kedayana Jagat Samsare Patita Pavatu Davavatara Mosama Patita Prabhu Napaveyara Patita Pavana Hetu Davagavatara Mosama Patita Prabhu Napaveyara Prabhu Nityananda Premananda Sukhe Kripa Balakan Akarao Ami Baruduke Aha Prabhu Nityananda Premananda Sukhe Kripa Balakan Akarao Ami Paraduki Noya Guru Sitapati Victor Gosai Avagriba Mulepai Chaitanya Dharma Noya Guru Sitapati Advaita Gosai Avagriba Mulepai Chaitanya Dharma Sanatana Ruparadona Matayuga Shichivaga Prabhu Lokanava Akasaru Sanatana Rupuranuna Matajuga Shijiva Raulukana Toyakoro Shiacharya Prabhushiniva Ramachandra Sangamane Naratamata Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Noya Guru Mole Doma Bela Ke Dayala Dakit Samsadaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Noya Guru Mole Mamina Kedayana Jacket Samsare Naya Prabhupada 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 Srila Prabhupada ki jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravikacharya also Teta Satishi Shimad His Divine Grace Alaya Chandanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada ki jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopikopadath Shayamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan ki jai Vrindavanam ki jai Mathuranam ki jai Jagannatha Swami ki jai Munamai ki jai Shivadi Lasidevi ki jai Sabhita Bhakta Vrinda ki jai Gaur Parimananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Gurun Gauranga Srila Prabhupada ki jai Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pacharni Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Dejanari. Let's read the translation to this poem by Narottam Das Thakur. My dear Lord, please be merciful to me, because who can be more merciful than your Lordship within these three worlds? Your incarnation is just to reclaim the conditioned fallen souls, but I assure you that you will not find a more fallen soul than me. Therefore, my claim is first. My dear Lord Nityananda, you are always joyful in spiritual bliss, since you appear always very happy. I have come to you because I am most unhappy. If you kindly put your glance over me, I may also become happy. My dear Advaita Prabhu, husband of Sita, you are so kind, please be kind to me. If you are kind to me, naturally Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda will also be kind to me. I pray for the mercy of Sarup Damodar, the six Goswamis, namely Shri Rupa Goswami, Shri Sanatana Goswami, Shri Bhatta Raghunath Goswami, Shri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Shri Jaiva Goswami, and Shri Raghunath Das Goswami, and Lokanath Prabhu. I, Narottam Das, Pray to the merciful Srinivasacharya, and I always desire the company of Amachandra. Okay, so let's continue with the study of the Jaiva Dharma. We're in a very, very interesting portion of the Jaiva Dharma, which is dealing with rasa bas. That means the conflicting and non-conflicting rasas that occur when the secondary rasas, the 7 secondary rasas, flavor the primary rasa. Okay. So Omagana Timirandasha Gananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shi Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shilpapad, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Okay, let's share the screen. Here we go. Alrighty. Let's move everything around. All right. Here we go. Okay. So yesterday we left off in the middle. Incompatible and compatible rasas. All right. Okay, we start with Dasha Ras. Dasha Ras, which is servitude relationship, is congenial with vibhatsa. That means ghastliness, shock, stuff like that. How is that? Because those who were serving the Lord, like Prahlad Maharaj, we described this actually before. Prahlad Maharaj is a servant. Shanta, because they're peaceful. Dharma Vira, heroic. And Dhanavira, Ras. Dhanavira means to be charitable or compassionate. Its opponents to Dasharas, the opponents are those which are not actually compatible or congenial, as the word is used here, are in Mathurya. So in Mathurya Ras, if someone's in Dasha, it's not compatible for him to be involved in any way or even in knowledge of what's happening with Mathurya Ras. Dasha Ras is not compatible with Yudha Vira. It means heroic fighting. And Rodra Ras means anger. Okay. Sakya Ras, that's friendship, is friendly to Mathurya. Of course it is, because you have the coward boys who actually assist Lord Krishna in his Mathurya Ras. Sakya Ras is friendly with Hasha. There's a lot of humor when Krishna and the coward boys are there. And Yudha Vira, fighting. It is unfriendly to Vatsalya. So Sakya Ras is unfriendly to the Vatsalya Ras, which is the parental relationship. Vibhatsa, which is what? That which is shock or ghastliness. Rodra, anger. And Bhayanaka, fear. Vatsalya Ras, that's the parental relationship, concurs or gets along with Hasha, humor, Karuna, compassion, and Bhayanaka Ras, that means fear. Because the parents of Krishna become very fearful when Krishna jumps into the Yamuna River. But disagrees, it's rasabas. It's not a good combination with Madhurya, the conjugal relationship, or Yudha Vira, heroic fighter. Phew. Dasha. It's not compatible with Dasha Ras, and it's not compatible with Rodra Ras. Madhurya Ras is compatible with Hasha, humor. Madhurya means conjugal, is compatible with Hasha, humor, and Sakya Ras, which means friendship, and is incompatible with Vatsalya, obviously, that means parental, Vivatsa, which means ghastliness, Shanta, peacefulness, Rodra, and Bhayanaka Ras. It's interesting. Of course, there are exceptions to this. Okay, so this is interesting because we were talking this morning that sometimes those in Madhurya Ras will experience man, which is anger, Rodra. So even though something's incompatible, sometimes in certain situations it's acceptable. And Bhayanaka Ras means fearfulness. Hasha Ras, that's humor, harmonizes with shock or ghastliness. Madhurya, conjugal, which we already said that, and Vatsalya, parental relationship. But it's incongruent, is not mixed with Karuna, compassion, and Bhayanaka Ras. Obviously, if you are laughing, you're not so compassionate. And if you're laughing, the probably is not so fearful. Adbhuta, wonder. Like Abhuta Shringa, that's the wonderful form of Lord Nrsingadev. Adbhuta is like shock. The shock ras is complementary, or it fits with heroism, with peacefulness, with servitude, actually practically everything. Wow. That's interesting. So, like wonder, Adbhuta means wonder, not exactly shock. Shock would be vivatsa, which is ghastliness. So Adbhuta is just amazing, wonderful. And so that's compatible with heroism, peaceful ras, servitude ras, Sakya, friendship ras, Vatsalya, parental, and Madhurya, conjugal. But Adbhuta resists Hasha, laughter. Sakya, appears to be a contradiction. Complements with Sakya, and then it says Sakya again here. Okay. So we have to figure out what's the clarification. Dasha, Rodra, and Vibhatsa. Vibhatsa means basically ghastliness. Rodra means anger. That we can understand, but why is Dasha and Sakya in there in both places? Well, I guess in certain circumstances, like I said, these are not so much hard and fast rules, but these are general principles. Whoops, sorry. No. Okay, hold on a second. Vira, heroism, strength, is friendly to wonder, humor, hasha, friendship, sakya, and dasharas, but is inimical to bhayanaka ras. In other words, that's obvious. If someone's heroic, the vira ras, then obviously they're not going to be fearful. Some are of the opinion that Shantaras is also inimical to Vira Ras. I would actually agree with that. Karuna Ras, that means compassionate, indirect or secondary ras or taste, coordinates well with anger and Vatsalya Ras. Oh, I think I understand the previous thing. Okay, let's go back here. Okay, let's stick with this. Karuna Ras coordinates well with anger, but Rodra, and Vatsalya Ras, which means parental, but not with heroism, Vira, humor, Hasya, and Sambhoga Madhurya. Sambhoga Madhurya means the meeting of Radha and Krishna when they're together. And doesn't coordinate nicely with Adbhuta, wonder, ras. So Karuna just like coordinates well with Rodra. That's interesting. Well, we've stated that before, that when the Lord is especially compassionate, karuna, then he may kill the demons. And that's Rodra. Rodra Ras is in harmony, anger is in harmony with Karuna and Vira, heroism, obviously. But Rodra Ras is not compatible with Hasya, humor. That's obvious. If you're really angry, you're not laughing. Madhurya, it's not, not really, but the man that the gopis are experiencing could be an experience, an exception. And Bhayanaka, fear, because when one is angry, one's not fearful. Bhayanaka, that means fearful ras, mixes well with ghastliness, vibhatsa, oh my God, and karuna ras. Yes, and compassion, but opposes. So what we're seeing right here, okay, let me explain these things. So the first ras mentioned is the one that becomes principal in certain circumstances, okay? Bhayanaka ras, when you're filled with fear, it mixes well with ghastliness and compassion. But it doesn't mix well under most circumstances with heroism, because if you're heroic, you are not going to be fearful. It doesn't mix well with madhurya. That's when Bhayanaka is prominent. It doesn't mix well with humor. Fear doesn't mix well with humor, which is hasya, and doesn't mix well with anger. Okay, you can read about all this in the Nectar of Devotion too. Prabhupada goes through these different mixtures of rasas and further details in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, because the Nectar Devotion is the summary study of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Let me just check the levels of audio here. Yeah, they're all right. All the other rasas are tatashta, which means neutral to one another. And Brajanath asks, Guruji, what are the results when the different rasas mix or mingle? Goswami said, when compatible rasas mingle, the result is greatly relishable. The best result gained when the anga limbs link up with the angi body. Let me explain what that is. So the anga is like the parts, and the angi is the whole. So in other words, just to put it in rasa theology, let's say you are established in Vatsalya, which is parental relationship. So, Karuna is compatible with Vatsalya. Karuna means compassion. So, when the compassion is connected with the parental relationship, just like when a parent, like Yashodamai, she has compassion or love, concern for Krishna. The criterion is not whether the rasas are mukhya, principal, or gona, subordinate. Because the mukhya rasas are the 5 rasas and the subordinate are the 7. But that the angi rasas, those who are the main one that's manifested in a certain circumstance, essential body mellows, combined with compatible rasas that may be harmoniously become their anga, their expansions, associated compatible limbs. Anga actually means limbs, but actually means expansions. Brajanath said, kindly define the difference between rasas that are designated as either angi or anga. Angi is the source, anga, or the main, and anga is the expansion. Goswami says, again, the consideration of whether the ras to be designated as either angi or anga is a mukhya or gona, that means principal, or secondary ras, is not the conclusive element. The ras that prevails for the moment over all others is the angi ras. That means the main ras, and the other ones are expansion. And those rasas that nourish that angi ras are called the anga rasas. The same example I gave before. Right? Example before was Yashodamai, and she is, or the parental affection in Yashodamai's case, in the example I gave, is the angi, or the principal mood, principal taste. And the anga, the expansion or the connection, would be, sometimes fear for Krishna's safety or compassion for Krishna. That would be an anga, which is connected. And so they're finishing the sentence. And they thus take on the role of sanchari bhavas. That means emotions that keep moving throughout the body. In this regard, the Vishnu Dharmottara states, Rasanam samavetanam yasharupam bhavet baho samantavyo rasastahi shesha sanchatanhumata. When several rasas become simultaneously active, the most outstanding is considered a sthai rasa, while the others are designated sanchari bhavas. So, okay, let's try to explain. When there's several rasas mixing, the one that's most prominent, outstanding, is the sthai rasa. Now, in this particular case, the sthai rasa may be one of the secondary rasas, and that's a temporary situation. For example, let's say Yashodamai is worried, fearful for Krishna's safety. And if she's fearful for Krishna's safety, that fear just overcomes her. And the other ones, like compassion or even her parental mood, becomes a sanchari bhava, because the parental move, sanchari means to move throughout the body. So this is interesting. Brajanath asked the question, how does a gona rasas are the 7 indirect rasas, like bibhatsa, ghastliness, humor, and hasha, how do they obtain the position of the principal ras, the angi? The angi is what the anga comes from. Just like if you perform yoga, you're called a yogi. And so the yoga comes from you, or you perform the yoga. Give me a second, I got to turn on some air here. Okay, that's better. So Goswami answers. Srila Rupa Goswami in the Northern Division, 8th wave, verses 46 to 50 of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu states, Prajan Vibhan Vanot Karshat Pushtim Mukyena Lambitaha Kunchata Nijamatena Gono Pyangi Thwam Achnute. Sometimes Mukyaras, the protagonist, primarily mellow, prefers a Sankocha, withdrawn mood, and nourishes the Gonaras, subordinate mellow, and simultaneously Vibhava, the impetus of love, becomes strongly manifest. Let me translate that. That's very easy to understand. Sometimes one of the principal rasas, let's give a practical example. Again, we'll go to Yashodamaya. Her mukhya ras is what? Parental affection, vatsalya. So sometimes that mukhya ras, which is basically the primary mellow, becomes sankocha, which means withdrawn, and it nourishes instead the secondary ras, the gona ras, which is the secondary ras, or subordinate mellow, like fear. So the fear becomes more prominent, which is what we discussed before. And simultaneously, vibhava, the impetus of love, becomes strongly manifest. So Krishna, in this particular case, let's say, Yashodamaya is very worried about Krishna's safety. So that worry becomes more prominent than the parental mood, but it's connected with it. And that worry, the impetus of love about Krishna, thought about Krishna, becomes a vibhava, stimulates more love. It's like a cycle, like a feedback loop. If anyone understands what a feedback loop is, that's a feedback loop. Then, the gona ras, the secondary relationship of fear, in this case we're talking about, just give me an example. It could be any of the secondary rasas, fear or shock or ghastliness or compassion or humor. Anyway, so then the gona ras, let's talk about this in the example, fear wears the crown of the angi ras. That means the other rasas that are manifesting with that devotee in that particular situation become limbs of the fear. It's quite a poetic expression. It's not literally limbs or expansions, but it's figuratively. Meanwhile, mukhya ras, that means the parental relationship. Mukhya is one of the 5. In this case, the example I'm giving is the parental relationship, slips into the role of a limb or expansion ras, that's anga ras, and cloaks her own magnificent, like in the case of Yashodamaya, her fear just overcomes her, and that also becomes a vibhava, as well as a Vyabhachari bhava or Sanchari bhava. Just as Vamana supported Indra, similarly, Mukhya Ras, acting as an anga, a limb, nurtures the Gona Ras, the secondary Ras, which is now turned into the source of the primary Ras. In other words, they switch positions. Normally, Yashodamai, she's immersed in parental affection, and she has a little bit of fear for Krishna's safety. But when Krishna was in the Kaliya lake and it was threatened, she felt that Krishna's life was in danger, then at that particular point, the fear became the principal ras temporarily. So we're talking about a temporary situation, and a parental affection nurtured what was previously a secondary relationship. Okay, that's what it means. I hope everyone understands that. To me, it's pretty simple. Mukyas twan gatvam asadya pushnam indram upendrat. Oh, I gotta actually explain that example. Gonam ivanginam kritva nigoda nija vaibhavaha. Okay, so Indra. Okay, Vamanadev is God. Okay, Indra is a demigod. Vamanadev is superior to Indra. Yet for pastime's sake, he took on a role that was inferior to support Indra, because he was Indra's younger brother. So in this particular case, the principal position of Vamana is called Mukhya, and he takes the position of a secondary position, even though he's God. So in other words, the tables are turned. Yet Mukhya Ras, the principal relationship, always shines resplendently in the heart of the devotee saturated with bhakti, which is scented with the sublime fragrance of endless transcendental desire to serve the Lord. Unlike the Gona Sanchari Rasas, which appear on occasion, eventually merge into the Mukhya Rasas, they become wanton Vyabhachari bhavas. That's so cool, that statement. So what that statement means, that this always, getting back to Yashoda, the principal, her foundational, let's use the word foundational, rasa, which is parental, always shines in her heart. It's never lost. And the secondary, which appear, the gona means the secondary, the 7 secondary rasas, sanchari, that means they move around, which appear on occasion, and sometimes they even appear to overcome the principal mukhya ras of an individual like Yashoda Maya. They appear temporarily, but later on, eventually, they merge away, they melt into the principal relationship of a parental relationship with Krishna, and then they actually are exhibited as symptoms of ecstasy, emotions. So in other words, they ebb and they flow. Thus, Mukhya Ras ultimately remains firm and preponderant. It is prominent, primary, whatever. Everybody understands that. Firm and preponderant. In other words, it's always there, and sometimes it goes a little bit into the background and appears to be the anga instead of the angi, the branch or the limb of the secondary relationship, but then ultimately it moves back. It ebbs and it flows, ebbs and it flows. Like Yashodamai getting anxiety about Krishna dancing and fearful on the heads, not on the heads, but she just like being trapped in the coils of the Kaliya serpent, and so she's immersed in anger, which becomes prominent, and then the parental affection comes back, ebbs and flows. Like all emotions. I mean, this occurs in the material world too. Anadi vasanod vasa vastate bhakta chetasi. Bhautiva anatulina shad eva sanchari gonavat. Certainly, mukya angi ras. Okay. Certainly, mukya angi ras. That means the principal foundational ras of a person, whether it's one of the five, allows herself to be garnished, means decorated. Garnish means decorated, or sometimes with food it means spiced. Spiced, yeah. Swajatiya angas, which are generally the compatible mellows. So ordinarily, okay, translate this. Ordinarily, one's principal relationship is flavored by the secondary relationships, and sometimes attacked by the vijatiya angas, the incompatible mellows, to form a conglomerate, a mixture of emotions, transcendental emotions. However, ultimately she, mukya angi ras, one's principal relationship, Yashodamai, remember, her relationship is parental, Vatsalya. Mukya angi ras asserts her independence and predominance. So ultimately, the parental relationship with Mother Yashoda comes back. And this principle can be applied to the parental relationship, the conjugal relationship, the friendship relationship, any of the five relationships. It's very easy to understand. If you just think about it, meditate about what's being said here. Angi mukya swam atrangar bhavaistar abhivardayam swajitiyar vijatihai swantantra sanvirajyate. One who is attracted to a particular mukya ras becomes eternally imbued and ensconced in her, which is thus manifest as the angi ras. Okay, normally, okay, translate that again. So we have a particular mukya ras. All of you, and me too, if I happen to be a spirit soul, which I don't know quite yet. I may be an AI person. So, all of you have one of these five mukya rasas. You're a passive adorer of Krishna. You're a servant of Krishna. You're a friend of Krishna. You're a parent or the mood of parent of Krishna. And you're in the conjugal rasa. Okay, one of these five is eternally imbued. You're not realizing it right now because you are in Maya. You think you have so many relationships in this world based upon the body. I mean, just like, okay, I'll give you a relation. I'll give you an idea what I mean. Okay, today I was driving my car. Okay, driving my car. And so whenever I saw someone, actually it was also yesterday, whenever I saw someone with the same brand of car, I became happy. Happened several times today, several times yesterday, and several times today. Became very, very happy and waved to the person. Sometimes even honked the horn. Because I identify that's what we're doing with all this skin disease, family attachment. Ooh. Anyway, it's called a skin disease. Just like today, I went to my doctor, and this was months and months ago. But today I went. He had done some operation on the skin, and he wanted to see if everything looked all right. And because it was a skin disease. And he looked and he said, "Oh, you've healed very nicely." So we want to heal from our skin disease. But unfortunately, we're trying to enhance our skin disease. Okay, getting back to Jaiva Dharma. It thus manifests as the Angi Ras. So normally, the source from all the branches is the principal ras, the foundational ras, the Mukhya ras, same thing. Well, same thing. I'm just giving different words that mean the same thing. All other rasas, even the other Mukhya ras, are relegated to the position of Angi, branches, in relation to one's essential Mukhya Angi ras. In other words, you, as a coward boy, let's say a coward boy, let's switch gears for a second, you may feel some protective, like parental affection for Krishna. You know, because the older coward boys, for example. So that's another Mukhya ras, parental. But that, in the case of the coward boy who feels protective of Krishna, that becomes a branch or a limb of his friendship ras, his Sakya ras. Okay. Angi, again, Angi means the source, Anga is the branch of the source, or the limb. Anga is the body, Angi is the limb. Very important principle. Let's see. Yasha mukyasya yo bhakto vavanitya nijashraya angi seva tatrasyan mukyo pyanyo nigatam rajet. Another relevant point is that only when the anga rasas, that means the limbs, the relationships, flow harmoniously with the Angi ras. In other words, there has to be compatibility. When you're not secondary, because that means something different, but when the limbs, or those which are manifesting as subordinate to your Angi, your main ras at that particular point, flow harmoniously with the main ras, thus enhancing the relish of rasa, taste, can one actually speak of anga rasas, limbs from the main ras. Otherwise, discussion of an unproductive alliance of anga rasas with the Angi ras is contradictory and meaningless. That's called rasabhas. So when anga ras with the Angi ras is contradictory and meaningless, I'll give you an example. Okay, so let's say my anga, I'm an Angi, so my Angi ras, not me, let's say someone, okay, all right, is Vatsalya. Vatsalya means parental. So that doesn't mix well with vibhatsa or disgust. So it's contradictory. And vibhatsa is trying to take the position of the limb of the main ras, but it doesn't work. I mean, one example would be, like, say, I so-called have a human body now. So if you tried to graft onto my body the leg of a monkey, it wouldn't work. Maybe it would. Or the leg of a cat. Okay. Just one joke. It has nothing to do with the class. Anyway, we'll stop sharing for a second. And then we'll take some questions. Okay, we stop sharing and then we'll mute yourself. I'll just tell a joke that I heard today, which has nothing to do with the class, but it sounds really funny. Everyone's heard of this chat box on the computer called Chat GBT. I'm sure everyone has heard of that. So the way the French people pronounce that, they pronounce it cat GBT. Anyway, it's a joke. It has nothing to do with class. It just came up when I was talking. I don't know how it came up. The joke just came to my mind. It's good to have a little enlivenment. So, all right. So, who has a question? You can type in the chat window, or you can unmute yourself again, or you can raise your hand. Who has a question? Little complex today, but try to understand the principle of anga and angi. Jagat, you have a question.
A feedback loop has the effect of amplifying the signal until it becomes deafening.
Yes.
So what is it that causes that loop to break? Is it the transformation into the Vyabhichari Bhavas?
Yeah, the transformation into the Vyabhichari Bhavas, because then one just falls unconscious at that point. You know, we're talking about Mother Yashoda and the fear, and the fear feeds into the parental relationships, and that, and then she loses consciousness, right?
Mm.
So that's a Vyabhichari Bhava, like death. I mean, she becomes like death. One of the Vyabhichari Bhavas is like death. She doesn't literally die, but it's for all intents and purposes. She almost stops breathing, you know. And then we have Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who sometimes, when he first saw Lord Jagannath, what happened? They thought he had died. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had to hold a little swab of cotton right next to his nose because there are no other bodily symptoms manifest. That's the Vyabhichari Bhava of death, or, you know, dying or whatever. So that happens. So, yeah, these are the symptoms of great devotees. So, good question. Yeah, so that's what happens. A feedback loop, just like feedback means less like when you have, you know, there's a microphone behind me somewhere, right there. It's a microphone. If there was an amplifier connected and there's some sound spoken into the microphone, and then it come out of the amplifier, and the amplified sound would actually enter the microphone again, and then it would become louder and louder and louder, and all of a sudden you hear a squeal. And of course the computer or the amplifier wouldn't die, but it would be pretty loud. So, good question. So, does anyone have any? You can type in the cat window. Got a question. If you speak French.
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Hare Krishna.
Please accept my humble obeisances. I have a question about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's swooning. What kind of feedback he got in that situation? Yashoda Mai's situation I understand, but can you explain what is the feedback?
Feedback, okay. So Lord Chaitanya saw Lord Jagannath. He's in the mood of Srimati Radharani. So that's the Angi. And the I guess the I mean, I'm just trying to analyze. I'm not saying that I'm a rasa expert, but my best guess, given the philosophy, would be that the Okay, the Angi is conjugal, Madhurya. And the Anga, at that particular point, the limb of the Angi would be wow, Adbhuta. Okay, let's go. Adbhuta. So the Adbhuta overcomes. That's an interesting analysis. Thank you for asking a question. The Adbhuta becomes at a certain point the Angi, and then the Madhurya can actually become. I mean, I'm not going to analyze Lord Chaitanya, but I'm saying this is a possibility. And the Anga becomes the Madhurya at that point. Temporarily. It's always a temporary overcoming, but the permanent always comes back and maintains her predominance, which is the Madhurya. Just like, I mean, I'll give you an example. Just like if you love someone very much and you haven't seen them for a long time, you actually forget. I mean, let's say one's son goes to join the army, the navy, or something like that. Okay, and the son comes back after some time. You become so joyful, you forget he's your son. I mean, the joy, the happiness, the wonder at seeing him, not ghastliness, hopefully, unless he's been injured by war, becomes overcome, and you don't give him instructions like he's your son anymore. It's just like the joy has become so great. And then that joy nourishes, the joy becomes the Angi, okay, and the Anga is the parental relationship with your particular son. So, anyway. So, we find that in the material world too, that sometimes it's just so joyful. So joyful when you meet someone after so much time that, okay, what kind of emotion or bhava causes a devotee to lose consciousness? That's called vyabhichari bhava. That's the strict definition. That's the question that Hrishikesh is asking. And it's just
Thank
like,
you so much.
And sometimes it's a combination. Like we just mentioned about the son or Lord Chaitanya and seeing Lord Jagannath for the first time. It's not mentioned that each time Lord Chaitanya went to see Lord Jagannath, he went unconscious. See, that's not mentioned. It's mentioned that the first time when he got to Jagannath Puri, he became unconscious because there was that mixture with the wonder. I mean, that's how I would analyze the situation. It's a mixture with the wonder, which becomes predominant over the Madhurya, but generally it wasn't like that. It's not described that during the Jagannath Rath Yakta, Lord Chaitanya fell in the street and became completely unconscious. He may have collapsed, but he didn't become completely unconscious. All right. Anyway, these are things that are beyond the purview of our experience at this particular point. We become unconscious if we don't get enough to eat. And so the hunger becomes the primary emotion. Anyway, and when we see a plate of food, I'm not hungry. I mean, I've eaten already. Don't worry. I'm not talking about that because I'm hungry. Okay, time to end. Thank you very much. All glory is to His divine grace.